Mother-in-law lied about me cheating, so husband left me while I was pregnant. Now, 5 years later, he's back trying to take custody. For some background, me and Keith had been dating ever since we were in undergraduate school. That is where we first met, became friends, and then eventually started our relationship. Even though the memories of our relationship have become slightly blurry after everything that happened and after the fact that so much time has passed since everything happened, I still would say in the span of 3 years of our marriage and 3 years of dating, we had a pretty good relationship. As far as I know, we had pretty good communication, trust, loyalty, and obviously love as well, but I guess, eventually, somewhere down the line it faded away for Keith, and that too when I was in one of the most vulnerable places of my life, pregnant with our first and only child. You see, I had always known that my ex-mother-in-law never liked me that much. She was very conservative, and not only Keith and I belonged to different nationalities. When it came to cultures, everything was different between us, like a complete 360 degrees. Well, being raised in America, this all was honestly never an issue for the two of us. We made everything work perfectly. Hell, we even had our wedding the American way. So, it never made sense to me why my ex-mother-in-law didn't like me or the differences between me and her son. Still, she made her dislike towards me evident, and by the time we got engaged, I had given up trying to get her to like me. So, it was pretty much just Keith who was mostly in contact with her. Well, when my ex-mother-in-law suddenly became very communicative towards me, I immediately had my doubts but pushed them away when my husband convinced me that she had just finally come around to accepting our relationship. I kind of agreed with the same, thinking there were no malicious intentions behind her behavior, and so, started talking to her, but it only took about a week since we began talking and my ex-husband's behavior started changing, not only towards me but to everyone around us. He had become quite withdrawn, as if he had some burden on his shoulders that he couldn't share with anyone around him. I immediately tried to get to know about it, but nothing ever came of it until about 3 weeks after, the very same day I got home from the hospital with my pregnancy test results being positive. Needless to say, I was so happy and was looking forward to sharing this news to my husband as well, but little would y'all know, it would be that day itself that this man decides to leave me, forever. It was the very first day of his disappearance itself that I had gone crazy. My gut feeling just said that I lost him and immediately went to the cops. I informed my in-laws, who just left me with more questions with their very blank reactions. I was so disappointed in them because I could tell, they knew something but also was aware of the fact that they would never tell me, and so, I didn't bother to tell them of my pregnancy either, because why would it make a difference? I had a very difficult pregnancy. It was hard to take care of myself when I spent the next 8 months going crazy over this man, even though the cops had told me they had found him and he had informed them that he had left by himself. I still remember that talk with the cops who informed me that I was most likely never going to see Keith ever again. I literally fainted on the spot and had to be taken to the cops. I had a similar reaction to when I received an envelope from Keith with the address hidden. It consisted of both a letter and documents which I opened and was shocked to know that they were divorce papers. I fainted on the spot, and it wasn't even the divorce papers that caused such a reaction. It was the very long letter, which talked about my non-existent affair with my boss, which he talked about. Yes, this man left me without confronting me about an affair I never had. Man, that day, if it weren't for my own mom that day, I would have probably lost my pregnancy that day itself. I signed the divorce papers in the hospital itself where I spent the last month of my pregnancy. It is needless to say, it was a very difficult pregnancy which left me with postpartum depression, but eventually, with a whole lot of therapy and the will to go ahead in life for my precious daughter, I made a lot of development, and that is how I lived the past 5 years of my life. I have made a lot of progress, moved on from my marriage, started working, but even through this, I would be lying if I didn't accept the fact that I missed the life we would have if my ex-husband would still be here, and I would have never guessed that after all these years, my husband would return, but as a nightmare. It was a couple of days back, I had moved houses after giving birth, and so, I never really looked back to the area we previously were living together until now. I had to go there to visit a friend who was back at her parents' place after being abroad for a while. So, before I got to her home along with my daughter, I made a stop to the local store to buy some snacks and drinks for us, and boy, I was shaking by the time I got to the first aisle itself, because I came across my ex-mother-in-law, looking at me. She recognized me immediately and walked up by herself, greeting me. I greeted her back awkwardly, and she instantly brought up Keith's and mine divorce, talking about how I shouldn't have cheated, yada yada. I just stood there in silence as she went on and on with her bullcrap until one point that she slipped, making a statement about how it was her who told Keith that I was cheating because I looked like it. I was dumbfounded, my blood boiled, and we started arguing as behind my friend, who had tagged along to visit my other friend, heard the commotion and came to see what was happening. My daughter followed behind her, laughing and giggling and telling me how my friend had gotten her the candy she wanted. Now, My daughter looks like the carbon copy of my husband. So, it is needless to say that it immediately clicked to my ex-mother-in-law that it was not only my daughter but also her son's daughter. She turned red in the face, as if she wanted to ask me so many questions, but I just turned my back and left. I thought nothing would come out of it because after all, to her, I was a cheater. Remember? But of course not. I'm pretty much convinced that this woman gets off to making my life miserable. So, she gave Keith my number, which I hadn't changed in years, and boy, I was shocked to see my phone being spammed with about 50 texts within the span of an hour itself. It wasn't just Keith though, it was most of his side of his family, people who I hadn't even talked to when I was married to him, all berating me for not telling him that I was pregnant, how I was a terrible person and how I was most likely cheating if I actually hid such an important piece of information from him, but that truly wasn't the case. I'm not sure why, but the guilt has actually kind of started taking over me or what happened, but I'm starting to feel guilty. Am I the a-hole for not telling my ex-husband, who ghosted me because he thought I was cheating, that I was pregnant? Update 1. After the overwhelming amount of suggestions, I decided to meet up with my ex-husband and hear his side of the story. He was so desperate to meet me that he flew over from all the way from Europe over the week. So, we meet and it's very awkward. Keith had changed a lot. He looked like he aged 2x within the span of 5 years. He looked stressed and depressed, and that's literally what our conversation started off with. He explained to me how his mom told him that she had seen me multiple times with my boss at multiple different occasions. That was enough to set his suspicions ablaze that he began stalking me and found me and my boss had grabbed lunch together during one occasion. That was it for him, and after reading one post over another on sites about infidelity, he hatched his plan of flying over to Europe and starting a new life. That is what he did the day he left, completely starting from scratch, but the thing that shocked me the most was the fact that he had ghosted his family too until about 2 years. I was honestly speechless as he told me how he spiraled down a pit of depression, how his job was stressful and how he wanted nothing but to come back to me, but his ego set him back from doing any of that. I just laughed at his face, telling him how everything went on my end. He was shocked to hear how his parents had treated him, LOL. At that point, it was like I had finally gotten the closure that I so very desperately wanted all these years, and I still couldn't get myself to forgive him or feel any empathy for him, which I told him so, and to which he seemed pretty offended. Well, he was kind of disappointed because I guess he thought I was going to cry with him on hearing his sob story. That wasn't me, and I even told him that because after all, he was the one who brought me to this point. Our conversation kind of ended abruptly there because I had to go pick up my daughter. I told him that I wasn't interested to see him again, and he kinda started becoming loud. So, I just left. Update 2. Hi everyone. I thought I wasn't going to update, but boy, what happened after literally 2 days of us meeting has left me dumbfounded and out of words. I received an envelope, yet again, and this time it was for a lawsuit that Keith and his mom were filing against me for custody. I instantly felt a sense of panic as I read how they were trying to go for full custody. I immediately booked an appointment to my lawyer, who I will be seeing by tomorrow. That is when I will update you all. Until then, if anyone knows anything about legal stuff, can you all tell me if they have a leg to stand on? Ever since I was pregnant, this man was never in my daughter's life. Hell, he isn't even on the birth certificate to begin with. So, do I have anything to worry about? Update 3. Hi everyone. I don't know if any one of y'all remember me, but I had posted a while back on this subreddit, asking for advice about my ex-husband who came back in my life after ghosting me for 5 years, to get custody of my daughter. I think I don't even need to say this, but he lost the custody battle. He was made to first take a DNA test which came back positive. I still remember the sheer surprise he had on his face after the results came back positive. It was almost funny because even the little bit of the doubt he had about my infidelity left, and it was like he knew he had just lost. Needless to say, the fact that he was so absent in her life since the very beginning became a disadvantage for him. Another disadvantage was the fact that he lived so far away that there was no way that I was going to let my daughter go live with him. So, after the results came out, it was like Keith kind of went crazy over it. He tried breaking into our house multiple times to see our daughter. It was a scary experience not only for her but myself too, because after everything he had done, it was surprising to see the sheer entitlement that this man had. I ended up getting up an restraining order against him. This was a crazy roller coaster. It was like this wasn't how I wanted to see the man who I loved once, but I guess that's how he always was. That's not my concern anymore though, because the only thing I am concerned now is protecting my daughter. I, 27 female, and my husband, 28 male, have been together for 10 years and finally got married last week. It was an amazing day as all my family were there and I got to marry my best friend. The day was going well and we all sat in the dining hall where we had speeches. My dad's speech consisted of childhood memories of me, how much he appreciates my husband, and a few jokes thrown in now and then. It was the perfect speech. It made me and many others tear up. When the meal/speeches was all over, the guests were invited to party on the dance floor, and the doors were open to guests who wanted to wander outside as the venue was a farm. After saying my hellos to all my guests, I found one guest, a family friend, sitting in a dark corner outside bawling her eyes out with her fiancé comforting her. I of course asked her what was wrong, and she mentioned that my dad had said something insensitive in his speech which I didn't pick up on. Her fiancé said it was the part when he said something along the lines of, "When am I going to have grandchildren?" Or, "I hope I get grandchildren." I was told that they have been trying to have children for years and been through IVF and had multiple miscarriages. I apologized to her and offered her a hug, but she refused and started screaming at me, saying how she wants my dad to apologize instead of me. A few people had heard her and I felt extremely embarrassed because I was being shouted at. My husband had also heard and came running to me. He eventually told her and her fiancé to leave as she was causing a scene and we just wanted to enjoy our wedding night. We offered to get them a taxi and they left without saying goodbye when the taxi arrived. Here's where I think I'm the a-hole. The next day I made sure the lady was okay and also asked why she started screaming in my face. She replied and said that we were insensitive, we didn't consider checking my dad's speech. We were also not sympathetic at all to her when we were speaking to her and told them to go home. I was shocked and also a bit hurt because I did comfort her, but she refused it and started screaming at me. I explained to her that my dad's speech was from the heart, so I couldn't pre-check it, and if she had a problem with my dad then she had a problem with me. I also said that she should have spoken to me about it in private instead of causing a scene because we didn't want any drama at our wedding, and that she was wrong to scream in my face about it. She then called me an a-hole and now I'm not invited to her wedding. Am I the a-hole? So I love to bake desserts. It's a meditative sort of activity to me. I really enjoy making tasty treats for other people, especially since I'm actually not a huge sweets person and could never eat all the stuff I bake. Most of the time I take it into work. I work at a small restaurant staffed by about a dozen people including the two owners. We are all pretty tightly knit as most of us have been here since the restaurant opened. I started bringing desserts for everyone to enjoy. It was never an obligation, nor did it ever feel like it. But I got a little miffed when I went in the day after I'd dropped off a pie to get my glass pie dish, and one of the owners handed it back to me still dirty. It still had crumbs and bits of pie crust left in it. I didn't say anything and just resolved to let it go. The following week I made an apple cake in a glass 9x13 to bring in, and left it that evening so the others on the later shifts could enjoy it too. 2 days later on my next shift, I was given back my dish that was still dirty, and now it needed to be soaked to clean it because the crumbs and such had dried to a hard layer. I thought this was kind of rude, as I'd been raised that if someone gifted me food, casseroles, etc., it was good manners by washing the dish that it came in when you go to return it. It happened a couple more times, so I asked the owner who was managing that day if my dishes could be washed before I got them back. However, the next few weeks nothing changed, and my dishes were still left dirty when they were returned. I decided that I'd just use disposable bakeware for anything I took to work. However, I ran into an issue that sometimes the baking time and temperature for some of my recipes doesn't work for the cheap metal disposable bakeware, something I'd forgotten about until I took a pie to work, and when they cut into it, it was discovered that the bottom crust was a bit burnt. One of the owners joked that I had downgraded my equipment so they got burnt pie. A server said she noticed I'd stopped using glassware and wondered why. So I replied that my glassware was never cleaned after everyone had eaten, and it was a major pain in the ass to clean after it was dried on. Plus I felt that it was a bit rude to have my dishes returned to me still dirty. The server shot back that the desserts were gifts, and that it's actually rude to insist that the giftees have to do something in return. Another server agreed with her, and said that if I was expecting them to wash my dishes for me, then I shouldn't bother making food for them at all. So I said I wouldn't if it was such a contentious issue. The servers said I was being petty and are refusing to speak to me unless they have to. Now, I could see their reasoning that someone being gifted something shouldn't be obligated to do something in turn, but I still feel that it's rude to not wash the dish that gifted food came in. So, am I the a-hole?